preferred language. So this meeting is also being live streamed. Okay. So later on, I'll remind this again, during the breakout session, we will divide the participants into 4 breakout sessions and then assign someone, please assign someone from your group to share the highlights of your discussion. So, yeah. So this session, as I mentioned, basically we'll talk about the expanded concept of consent when it comes to communities or developmental projects that are being implemented in communities. So for this session, our objectives are, we have 2 objectives for this session. One is to discuss how legal empowerment ensures participation and involvement of the grassroots communities in the decision-making process in projects that have direct impact on their communities and rights, specifically land rights, indigenous people's rights, and environmental protection and conservation. And then later on, during our breakout session, we would also like to solicit recommendations and insights from the participants on what you think are policy reforms or mechanisms that should be in place in terms of ensuring community consent or participation in these issues. So for our first session, our anchor presentation will be presenting the concepts, discuss the concepts and principles pertaining to community consent. So our speaker is Marlon Manuel. He's the Senior Advisor from Legal Empowerment Network, NEMATI, and then he has more than 2 decades of experience in legal empowerment work, having devoted practically his entire career to social justice and human rights lawyering. So from 2008 to 2017, Marlon was the coordinator of the alternative law groups. As I mentioned, it's a coalition of 18 legal resource organizations in the Philippines. So Marlon is also a professor at the Ateneo de Manila University School of Law, where he received his Juris Doctor degree in 1994. And he received his Bachelor of Science degree in Management from the College of Arts and Science of the same university. So for our anchor presentation, I'd like to welcome Marlon Manuel.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure if there are participants joining us from a different time zone in their morning, but if you are, or evening, good morning, good evening. And I think this is being live streamed, and the recording will also be made available. So hello, everyone. As Sheila mentioned, I work at NEMATI. I am based in the Philippines. And our work in NEMATI is to support the Legal Empowerment Network. And Sheila mentioned the Legal Empowerment Network. So what I will be doing here now is to present an emerging campaign vision, a vision for a land and environmental justice movement that includes not only network members, but also different organizations. And I hope participating organizations that are here today will also be part of this campaign, part of this movement that we are starting to build. We just recently convened a small core group of land and environmental justice activists to discuss issues concerning climate change, land and environmental justice. And what I will be presenting to you is the product of the series of conversations that culminated in that recent convening we had in Mexico and in Nairobi. So Sheila mentioned that we'll be discussing consent, and we'll be discussing communities' decision-making powers. So it really boils down to that. When we talk about community consent, and when we talk about what we want to achieve, overall, we are fighting for communities that have been systemically, historically harmed or marginalized to have a say to have the decision, the power to decide over what happens in and on the land and natural resources that they own and or use. So not only land, but including water, forest, mountains, and other natural resources. So I will be breaking this overall theme into 5 different components. Okay. First component, impacted communities should be able to say yes or no to what happens on their land and their environment. As we know, and I don't have to emphasize this, throughout the world, and I'm sure you have experienced, these environmental harms are concentrated in communities with less wealth and power, and communities who face discrimination, indigenous peoples in many instances. And the communities deserve the right to shape what happens on their lands. Some people will say governments may say, we are consulting them, but we are saying consultation is not enough. It's not enough. Consent should be the requirement, and consent is different from consultation. Communities should be able to say yes or no to any form of development. And if they say yes, under what conditions? What are the terms for that consent for a company to go into their land and to start any development project? And to make these decisions, the communities need to access the necessary information, accurate information about both benefits and the harms, the potential risks that a development project or an activity will bring to them. They also need to be able to create their own structure for providing consent. Indigenous peoples already have this in many cases. And their processes should be recognized. And special care must be taken to ensure that women have equal access to information and women have equal power in the decision-making process involving the community. So that's the first component. Impacted communities say yes or no to what happens on their land. Second, we talk about protection. We talk about safety, security. It should be safe for impacted communities or communities facing harm because of development projects. It should be safe for them to speak up about what they see happening on their land and what they would like to see happening. Again, there are many statistics showing that many times when people speak out about the social and environmental impacts on their land, they are threatened or they're violently attacked. We have seen many environmental justice activists killed or facing what we call as slap cases or harassment actions in court. So while the impacts on human rights defenders are getting increasing attention, the dangers within their communities, and especially for women, get less global recognition. So when we talk about safety and security for impacted communities, we are saying violence and threats of any kind against impacted communities, against the leaders or those who speak up for them, must stop. Number 3, what communities are observing or monitoring as happening to their land and neighborhoods, their environment, should be valuable information that should go into any decision making. So communities' facts, what they get from their own monitoring systems, must be incorporated into decision making. Their voice must be heard. Their data, their facts should be considered in any official decision making processes. And this must include decision making processes of governments, decision making processes of corporations, particularly investors. And not only those who are implementing projects, but those who are funding the projects of the big corporations. And number 3, also donors and large NGOs providing communities with resources to do simple monitoring of impacts and partnerships. So we are asking governments, corporations, donors, and large NGOs to consider what the communities are getting from their own monitoring systems as valuable information that should be considered in any decision-making projects concerning any decision-making process concerning development projects that would have an impact on land and natural resources. So that's the third component. Fourth component, communities should have access to resources necessary for them to participate in decision-making processes. It's very easy to say, okay, you participate. But in many cases, there are many obstacles. Language could be an obstacle. Distance, the remote areas where participants, where leaders of communities will be coming from. There are so many obstacles to participation. So when we talk about decisions about project development, they involve a huge power imbalance between the corporations and governments on one hand, and impacted communities on the other hand. So when we say there should be consent, communities should consent to what happens on or to their land and natural resources. We are saying communities must have access to the resources that will enable them to fully, effectively participate in decision-making processes. Governments should ensure that financial, environmental impact information must be disseminated to communities in an accessible manner, in a timely manner, in a consistent manner. Corporations should likewise set aside funds to enable frontline communities to secure independent support. So it's not a one-way system where corporations provide the facts, provide the data about potential risks, about potential benefits. Corporations should be able to find a way to also support communities so that they can secure independent support. They can secure independent support from scientists. They can secure independent support from lawyers, for example, from pro bono lawyers, for example. Communities should be leading participants in these mechanisms, whether at the local level, national level, regional, or international level, to determine how climate financing is spent. So this involves financial resources. And the fifth component is that impacted communities should be invested in, or there should be investment in communities. There should be financial support in communities to realize their own vision for sustainable development. We are, when we talk about communities having the power to give their consent, we are saying communities should be able to say yes or no. So it's not always saying no. Communities should have their own vision, their own aspiration of how they want to develop their community, how they want to develop their land and natural resources. And we are saying when they say yes to something, when they plan their own development of their area, forest management, for example, community-based forest management, then there should be investments in these projects, and communities should be financially supported by different stakeholders, governments, corporations, and even donors and large NGOs. So those are the 5 components. Again, I will summarize just to have for our quick reference before I move on to a different aspect. So we are saying we are fighting for communities that have been systemically harmed or marginalized to have a say over what happens in and on the land and natural resources that they own and or use. Number 1, they should have a say. They should be able to say yes or no to what happens on their land. Number 2, it should be safe for them to speak up about what they see happening on their land and what they would like to see happening. Number 3, what they observe as happening to their land and neighborhoods should be valuable information that is incorporated, inputted into decision making. Number 4, communities should have access to resources necessary to enable them to participate in decision-making processes. And number 5, communities should have the necessary financial support, and there should be investments in their plans to realize their own vision for sustainable development using their land and natural resources. Now, how do we want to get there? What is our approach? If that is the main vision, the main campaign vision. Number 1, and this is very important, impacted communities should be the primary change makers. They should be the primary actors. So when we talk about legal empowerment, we are saying the communities should take their own action, should make their own decision. So the fight should be centered on empowered, impacted communities, not the lawyers, not the big NGOs, but the communities themselves. Organized communities with knowledge of the law are our first line of defense against climate change and environmental destruction. And also, they are also our best hope for a new global economy that will sustain all of us. So what does this mean? This means that our movement must be able to harness the strength of communities, the knowledge, the leadership of the people who live at the front lines of inequality and environmental destruction. They will be involved in shaping the movement, in shaping and deciding on campaign activities and demands. In building this movement, we recognize that often women's voices are not heard in decisions about land and development. And at the same time, women tend to bear more negative impacts from extractive activities, for example, and the impact of climate change. So, for us to be successful in this campaign, where impacted communities will be at the center, we will seek out women leaders and support bringing their nuanced views into discussions promoting change. We will also bring the discussion about the movement to where women are, from water filling stations to childcare centers, to farms where they are working so they have access to the campaign. The campaign should be able to support local struggles. So while we are saying that this is a global campaign, the fight will happen in local and national spaces. A global campaign is not always well positioned to help solve local issues. So because this is community-centered, we will always follow the lead of local leaders and seek to get them the resources they need to be successful. At the same time, while supporting local struggles, we will pursue systemic changes in global advocacy spaces. And we will start with engaging in two spaces. Number one is corporate accountability. Number two is climate finance. So when we talk about corporate accountability, this covers advocacy spaces where there are standards being set and consequences made clear for corporate behavior. And there are some emerging areas concerning corporate accountability. Number one, corporate due diligence laws. There are a number of in the EU and in other countries and regions, there are emerging discussions on the imposition of certain requirements, certain standards for corporate due diligence laws, regulations. While there's a lot of excitement about the potential of these emerging laws, we want to emphasize that they must be made more specific to respond to the land and environmental justice needs of communities, requiring full disclosure, for example, reviewing ownership of corporations. Corporations required to comply with national and traditional grievance redress mechanisms, a number of other things that will put communities at the center of the due diligence laws. Second, in addition to the due diligence laws, we're also looking at the discussions on the binding treaty for UN guiding principles on business and human rights. Many of you are familiar with the guiding principles, and there are emerging discussions about making a binding instrument on business and human rights that will include, or that must include, from our campaign vision, the treaty must include the needs of impacted communities and must include their active participation in the process of ensuring that that human rights are respected and protected in business activities. Last, and this is about money, again, about financing. Climate finance. We know there's a lot of money that being made available, supposedly, to address climate change. When we hear about $100 billion being pledged annually to respond to the threat of climate change, we're imagining transformative opportunities for how communities are involved in investments and how they are viewed as beneficiaries. So while we are not focusing solely on climate change, not solely on emissions, for example, we see this advocacy space, the discussions on climate financing, as an opportunity to test models of investments that could get global attention and replication. And we are asking that 40% of the investments must go to environmental justice communities on the front line. And again, we are saying that whenever we talk about investment, it should be investment with consent of the communities. Again, just to end, I go back again to how we started, and just to remind everyone, overall, we are fighting for communities that have been systemically, historically, systematically harmed or marginalized by different activities concerning land and environmental justice, to have the power to decide, to have a say over what happens in and on the land and natural resources that they own and or use. And that is what we are fighting for. And hopefully many of you will be with us, and we can work together in building this movement and in fighting for this vision together. Thank you very much. Salamat po. Back to you, Sheila.
Yes, thank you, Marlon. Thank you for discussing some of the major concepts and principle of grassroots participation and significance of community consent in any projects that have impact to their community. You mentioned that we should really focus on impacted communities, and they should be the primary actors in terms of the issues that concerning their land and environment. So for questions and clarifications, we would be entertaining at least, I think, 2 or 3 questions. If you have questions, you can write it on the chat box, or you can just unmute yourselves or raise your hand, and then I'll just call your name. So does anybody have questions? Okay. You can write your question in the chat box if you want. Yes. Can you just introduce yourself?
ขออนุญาตว่าภาษาลาวนะจ๊ะ Hello.
Okay. Hello. Yes, we can hear you.
ขออนุญาตว่าภาษาลาวนะจ๊ะขออนุญาตมีคำถามน้องติดพันกับคำเห็นเกี่ยวกับปัญหาดังกล่าวนี้หน่อยนึงเพราะในการที่จะสร้างความเข้มแข็งให้แก่ชุมชนเนาะเพื่อให้เวียกงานเนาะตัวนี้นะมันมีความยืนยงติดพันกับปัญหากฎหมายนี่ตามที่ท่านมาร้อนเพิ่นบรรยายมาว่าสิเน้นให้ชุมชนนั้นเนาะมีความสามารถในการตัดสินใจปัญหาดังกล่าวด้วยตนเองเนาะตามทัศนะแล้วเนาะคิดว่าการที่จะเฮ็ดได้ขึ้นแนวนั้นเนาะมันต้องติดพันกับหลายๆองค์ประกอบเนาะบ่เพียงแต่ชุมชนก็สิสามารถเข้มแข็งด้วยตัวเองได้มันต้องติดพันกับนโยบายของพรรคของรัฐนำนะเพราะฉะนั้นเนาะในการที่จะเฮ็ดตัวให้เราต้องสร้างความเข้มแข็งให้แก่บุคลากรเนาะโดยเฉพาะนำเอาผู้เชี่ยวชาญที่มีความรู้ความสามารถทางด้านกฎหมายโดยติดพันกับเรื่องสิทธิมนุษย์เรื่องผลประโยชน์เรื่องสิ่งแวดล้อมอย่างไรลงไปโฆษณาเผยแพร่เนาะให้เขาเจ้าให้ได้ผู้ก่อนเนาะให้เขาเจ้าเข้าใจเกี่ยวกับแนวทางนโยบายของพรรคเนาะว่าเฮาอยากเฮ็ดหยังแท้ๆเนาะที่มันเป็นประโยชน์สำหรับเขาแล้วจากนั้นจึงคอยให้เขามีความเห็นแล้วก็มีเนาะมีความคิดเห็นต่อสิ่งที่ทางภาครัฐหรือว่าทางโครงการต่างๆที่จะไปเฮ็ดนะเนาะมีความเห็นเพื่อให้เขาเจ้าหันมีเวลานอนขนขวาในการตัดสินใจมีเชื่อสามารถว่ามันสิสอดคล้องเหมาะสมกับบ่เนาะถ้าเฮ็ดคือแนวนี้เนาะและอีกกรณีนึงเนาะเฮาจะสามารถเฮ็ดเป็นการสร้างความแข็งในการนำเอาบุคคลเนาะบุคคลเป็นตัวแทนของชุมชนนั่นเนาะอาจจะเป็น3 5บ่หรือว่าอาจจะเป็นผู้นำเนาะของชุมชนนั่นเนาะไปทำการเนาะผู้ของผมหรือสร้างความรู้เกี่ยวกับปัญหาเหล่านี้โดยเฉพาะเรื่องกฎหมายเนาะโดยเฉพาะเรื่องสิทธิผลประโยชน์ที่มันเกี่ยวของเนาะข้อกำหนดที่มันเกี่ยวของกับเรื่องการปกป้องสิทธิผลประโยชน์ของเขาเจ้าหันเนาะหลังจากนั้นจึงค่อยให้ต่างหน้าเหล่านี้นั้นเนาะนำเอาปัญหาดังกล่าวนี่หรือสิ่งดังกล่าวนี่ไปโฆษณาเผยแพร่เนาะสร้างความผูกพันส่วนแล้วจึงค่อยสำรวจคือความคิดเห็นแล้วให้เขาเนาะตัดสินใจด้วยตัวของเขาเองว่าเขาจะสามารถรับสิ่งดังกล่าวนี่ได้หรือบ่เนาะยอมรับได้บ่ถ้ายอมรับได้ก็เนาะก็ยอมรับถ้ายอมรับบ่ได้เนาะก็ให้เขาเจ้าเสนอเห็นว่าเขาเจ้าอยากให้แก้ไขในทิศทางใดในรูปแบบใดเนาะแต่ถึงอย่างไรก็ตามเนาะการที่จะอยากลงงานตัวนี้ได้ให้มันมีความแข็งแกร่งและมีความยืนยงขึ้นได้นะทั้งพนักงานของรัฐหรือว่าทั้งภาคส่วนต่างๆที่มีส่วนเกี่ยวข้องจะต้องยึดมั่นในหลักจรรยาบรรณจริยธรรมอะไรเนาะเรื่องผลประโยชน์ต่างๆที่พันก็ต้องเลย ป้าถิ่มไปก่อนเนาะนึกต้องเลยคือเทนชุมชนนี่เป็นหลักต้องทุเทนผลประโยชน์อันร่วมของชาตินี่เป็นหลักแล้วก็ผลประโยชน์ส่วนรวมนี่เนาะตามทัศนะส่วนตัวนะคิดว่าจงมาในแบบนี้ที่ว่าบรรทัดเนาะคิดมีความเห็นแนวใดบ่ที่ก็ขอบใจเนาะ
Okay. Marlon, would you like to react?
There's no question. I just want to affirm what Bunley said. The importance of information, communities having access to information, and the importance of representation. Communities having representatives in any conversation, in any decision making. About the third item that Bunley mentioned about government officials not thinking about their own interests but instead thinking about communities. That's something else. I mean that is an aspiration that we all have, but in many instances we don't see government officials serving the interests of the people. That's why it's important for communities to have their own power, to have a say, because there is a great imbalance in the power that is held by governments and corporations and the power that communities have. So we need to harness that power, the power in communities.
Okay, there's a comment in the chat box in reflection of the question from Laufran Community empowerment works depend on government policies, and it should not and is not a one-off activity itself to sustain. Any specific advice to sustain the community empowerment activities aside from the government policies? So
that's a good question, and we are not relying on government. Definitely, when we talk about community empowerment, we are not relying on government. Government policy could be conducive to community empowerment initiatives, but we should take steps on our own, working together, different stakeholders. Organizing is a key aspect of any community empowerment program. Awareness of laws, awareness of rights, and enhancing, strengthening the community's ability to use that law, to navigate through the legal system, to navigate through the government processes, and for the community members to act together collectively, not only among themselves, but also in partnership with other stakeholders and with other communities who are similarly situated, who are facing the same harm. So it's really a long drawn process. I mean, empowerment it's a process. It's an approach that takes a long time, and community strengthening is the key to that.
Okay, we'll entertain one last question. So Campio Vilaypon is raising his or her hand from Lao. Please unmute. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
แล้วขออนุญาตมีความเห็นเนาะสำหรับตัวที่เพิ่นถามในเรื่องของการสร้างความเข้มแข็งให้แก่ชุมชนนี่นะกะข้าพเจ้าก็มีส่วนที่จะเห็นดีกับอาจารย์บุญหลายได้เว้ามาเนาะแต่ข้าพเจ้าก็ขอเสริมนิดนึงในเรื่องของการสร้างความเข้มแข็งอยากให้ชุมชนนี้มีความยืนยงนี่เนาะเฮาก็ต้องแบบคือเฮาก็ต้องได้ให้เขาเจ้าความเข้าใจก่อนนั่นแหละว่ากฎหมายเป็นหยังเพราะว่าเดี๋ยวนี้เฮาบางทีหลายๆทางก็ฮู้ว่าชุมชนที่ห่างออกไปจากนครหลวงห่างออกไปจากซอกอีกหน่อยนึงนี่เขาเจ้าจะบ่ทันฮู้ถึงกฎหมายเนาะยังบ่ทันฮู้ถึงสิทธิ์ตนเองมีสิทธิ์แนวใดคันทะตนเองมีหยังเด้เอิ้นว่าเปอร์เซ็นต์ที่ฮู้นี่เอิ้นว่าเปอร์เซ็นต์มีน้อยเนาะมีน้อยเนาะถ้าเทียบใส่พวกเอิ้นว่าถ้าเทียบใส่พลเมืองลาวนี่เอิ้นว่ามันก็ยังอันนั้นอยู่คันซั่นว่าถ้าอยากจะสร้างความเข้มแข็งให้แก่ชุมชนมีความเข้มแข็งและมีความยืนยงนี่เฮาก็ต้องเฮ็ดจังได๋เฮาก็1ก็ต้องแม่นหยังให้เขาเจ้าฮู้ถึงว่าเขาเจ้ามีสิทธิ์หยังแดเนาะเมื่อมีการละเมิดสิทธิ์เขาเจ้าจะเฮ็ดแนวใดเนาะอันนี้ก็คือต้องแบบนี้ต้องไปก็คือว่าต้องได้นำเอา ผู้ที่ฮู้กฎหมายเนี่ยไปเผยแพร่กฎหมายเว้าถึงให้กับเจ้าฮู้ถึงสิทธิ์ฮู้ถึงพันธะกับเจ้าในเรื่องของเวลาเขาเจ้าถูกละเมิดเขาเจ้าจะมีการนั้นไปท้วงเอาสิทธิ์เขาเจ้าแนวใดอันนี้ก็ต้องอย่างเพื่ออย่างเพื่อให้เขาเจ้ามีความฮู้เพื่อจะมาปกป้องสิทธิ์ของตนเองเนาะอันนี้ก็คือว่าอยากจะว่าต้องแบบว่าเอาผู้ที่ฮู้กฎหมายนั่นแหละอย่างคือดังที่พวกศูนย์ของพวกเฮาคือศูนย์บริการกฎหมายประชาชนนี่เฮาก็ได้เฮ็ดเวียกตัวนี้ก็คือว่าได้เอานักศึกษาลงไปมาลงให้ความรู้ให้แก่ประชาชนในเรื่องของกฎหมายบ่ว่าจะเป็นกฎหมายต่างๆเนาะอันนี้ก็คือศูนย์ของเฮาก็ได้เฮ็ดเวียกตัวนี้เนาะที่ว่าจะต้องในอนาคตก็ต้องจะได้เฮ็ดต่อๆไปแหละอันนี้ก็คือว่าเฮาก็เพื่อจุดประสงค์ของเฮาก็คือว่าสร้างความเข้มแข็งให้แก่ชุมชนนั่นแหละเนาะอันนี้ก็ขอเสริมนิดนึงเนาะขอบใจ
Okay. Thank you.
ขออนุญาตเนาะขออนุญาตเสริมอาจารย์น้ำหิว
So
ก่อนอื่นก็เห็นดี
okay.
ลุงหาชุมชนเนาะเขาก็ลุงหาชุมชนเขาก็ก่อนอื่นเบิดเขาสร้างความเข้มแข็งให้แก่อาจารย์หลังจากอาจารย์ก็นักศึกษาเพื่อหยังเพื่อพัฒนาชุมชนสองมาพัฒนานักศึกษาเพราะว่าอนาคตนักศึกษาอยู่กับอย่างน้อยจะเฮ็ดเวียกอยู่ศาลอัยการทนายความหมออย่างต่างๆหรือว่าไปเป็นอยู่กับอย่างเนาะเจ้าเมืองเจ้าแขกเนาะก็มีพัฒนากับเจ้าคือกันบ่แม่นว่ามีแต่ด้านเดียวเนาะคือโครงการของบริษัทที่อย่างก็โฮงสาเนาะก็แม่นต้องการมีนักศึกษาที่อยู่ศูนย์ของเฮาคือกันเนาะบ่แม่นว่ามีแต่ชุมชนอย่างเดียวอันนี้ข้าพเจ้าก็อยากขอเพิ่มเติมอาจารย์กระผิวเนาะก่อนอื่นเบิดสร้างความเข้มแข็งให้ครูอาจารย์แล้วก็นักศึกษาก่อนจะลงไปให้ความรู้นะเราต้องพัฒนานี่ก่อนท่านนักศึกษาบ่เข้าใจด้านกฎหมายเฉพาะด้านผู้อาจารย์บ่เข้าใจเฉพาะด้านนี่เฮาก็บ่สามารถที่ว่าลงไปหาชุมชนได้เจ้าขอเพิ่มเติมอาจารย์กำผิวกับอาจารย์อย่างก็มาตามภาคใต้หั่นเจ้าขอขอบใจ
Thank you. And Sheila, just a quick comment.
Sure.
That additional comment. It's also important for us to build the expertise within the communities themselves. And there are many programs training community members to be paralegals, so that they will have their own internal legal resource. So the paralegals have the necessary knowledge, the skills, and they are from the communities. They could be community leaders. So they work closely with lawyers, they work closely with students, with professors, teachers, but the community will have them as their own experts. And we have seen many examples in Laos, in Myanmar, in Cambodia, in Thailand, and many other countries, not only in Asia but also in other countries, having community paralegals. That's an essential component of community empowerment programs.
Okay. And also just to add a comment from the chat box. So it's from Yadana. He said, to enhance the community empowerment, clear and precise laws are needed, and they should be easily understandable by local ethnic communities as well. So I think that will end our first session. It's just the first part of our session for this afternoon. So thank you, Marlon, for the sharing and providing insights in terms of consent, community consent. Now we're going to move forward with the next part of our session. So we've invited two lawyers and NGO workers, one from the Philippines and one from Thailand. So they will be sharing with us how civil society organizations, paralegals and paralegals actually ensure community participation in projects related to land rights that has direct impact on the land rights, indigenous peoples, and environmental protection issues. So our first, sorry, I need my PowerPoint presentation, so I'll be able to introduce them properly. So our first speaker is from the Philippines. So we have Efinita Takeban. We call her Mai Takeban. She is from the Legal Rights and Natural Resource Center. She is the executive director of LRC. She's a human rights lawyer and an advocate for social justice. So her work focuses on the recognition and protection of the rights of Indigenous peoples and upland rural communities to land and environmental through grassroots empowerment, participation in strategic and progressive legal interventions and policy reform. She's also co-convener of the Panang Hughes Philippine Network to uphold Indigenous people's rights. She's a member of the Executive Committee of the Friends of the Earth International, and she was also a former previous chairperson of the alternative law groups. So our first speaker is Mai Takevan. And then our second speaker is Sor Ratanamani Polkla from CRC Thailand. So Sor, we call her Sor. Her career spans from the past 20 years of public interest lawyering in Thailand, and she has been involved in many of its most significant recent cases. After working for years as an independent public interest lawyer in 2020, she co-founded with Prashant Singh the Community Resource Center, a non-government organization working with communities who face the impact of development projects. Sor is a lawyer and executive coordinator of CRC, who lead lawyers team to work on those cases of CRC. So as public interest lawyer, we are working for the people. That's why we are called the Community Resource Center. So welcome, Mai and Sor.
Hello, Sheila. Hello, everyone.
Can we now, okay, I'm going to spotlight both of you. Okay, Theen? Okay, so good afternoon, Sor, and good afternoon, Mai. Before we start, maybe you can both share a bit about your organization, what LRC is focusing on and what CRC is working on. So I think I'm going to ask Sor first to introduce CRC, and then Mai will give us an information about LRC next. So Sor?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to share our experience, and also I would like to introduce my organization. We call Community Resource Center, that we focusing on the legal aid, supporting community who face with the development project in Thailand. And we also supporting the community outside Thailand who are facing with the human rights or environmental violation across border from Mekong regions with Myanmar, also Laos, that we handle the case of the Mekong Dam on the Sayaburi Pak Bang Dam, and also we support the community from Cambodia who lost their land from the concession and also illegal land grabbing in Cambodia, bringing them to Thailand, filing the case to get the remedies. And also with the Myanmar side, we support the community monitoring the project on the mining to stopping the mining issue as well. What we do the legal aid, we support for the court case, and also we doing the advocacy, try to bring up our cases to be ashamed of the policy as well. Then we do some campaign, especially with the business and human rights. And actually today is the last day of the UN conference in Bangkok for the Asia Pacific Business and Human Rights Conference in 2022. And we support the community to join for the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. And by our work, we also engage with the paralegal. We have the community working with us as a paralegal because of our office is very small. We have only 4 lawyers, but we handle the case across Thailand and also other country for now 50 cases, but earlier it's like 100 cases. Then we need hand from the community and we like empowering them and also make them as a paralegal. That is our work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sor. Mai?
Thank you. Like Sor, I'm quite glad to be invited in this panel. Perhaps I'd talk about LRC by way of talking about our history and our founders. No, so LRC was founded in 1987. They were then law students who wanted to apply their legal knowledge and develop their skills in the service of marginalized communities, particularly Indigenous peoples and poor rural upland communities. So the students eventually became lawyers. One is now a Supreme Court justice, the other a climate negotiator and professor, an advocate and development worker, and finally an academic who looks into the applied and engaged contributions of research. So their track is pretty much also LRC's development track. No? It was and it remains to be LRC's aspirations to bridge the gap between the aspirations of marginalized communities and the technical, often very abstract language and processes of institutions, judicial institutions, governance, so on, for the meaningful participation of communities and their access to justice. LRC does this through, like many of us here, grassroots empowerment, particularly enhancing capacities. Marlon had said community paralegals. We do this like SOAR, direct legal servicing, and research and policy development, and advocating for policy reforms. We also amplify Indigenous people's issues to generate broad support. So pretty much that's LRC.
Okay. Sor, are you back? So thank you, Sor, and Mai for giving us a brief background of your organization and your work. But given your experience in working on environmental protection, land rights, and Indigenous people's rights, are there policies in your country or mechanisms that provide opportunities for grassroots communities to participate or consent to the implementation of projects that have direct impact on their land, on their rights? If yes, can you briefly share about this policy or policies? So we'll go with Mai first.
Let me see. Yes, there are in terms of legal documents. No, for example, as the foundational law of the land, the 1987 Constitution, articulates the recognition, promotion, the protection of the rights of Indigenous peoples. The state policy articulated in the Constitution, if you would allow me to belabor a bit of history, was born of the recognition of the historical marginalization of Indigenous peoples. In our contemporary history in the Philippines, this was made even more apparent during the martial law regime of under Marcos Sr., when development projects were imposed on Indigenous communities without their consent, and consequently, a lot of human rights violations were committed. From the Constitution, this was more particularly addressed in the IPRA, or what we call the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, which this particular law enshrines free, prior, informed consent as empowerment, also as a process, which recognizes as well their historically differentiated context. And by historical, I mean the historical marginalization of Indigenous peoples. So the law emphatically defines free, prior, informed consent. Consent is free from any external manipulation, interference, and coercion. Having said that, the Philippines prides itself as being innovative and trailblazing with its passing of the IPRA. But we certainly fall short in the implementation. At some point, we were designated as the country as the most dangerous place for environmental human rights defenders, most of whom are Indigenous peoples. So where there are opportunities, protections afforded by the law, these are opportunities and protections that are constantly being challenged. Thank you, Sheila.
Okay. Sorry, just a quick follow-up question before I go to SOR. You mentioned about the free, prior, and informed consent. That is part of the IPRA law, the Philippines. So you've also mentioned about challenges. Sorry, I think, did we lose Mai? Mai, are you still there?
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Okay, okay. Sorry. So you mentioned also about the challenges in terms of the implementation of the IPRA law. So particularly with the free, prior, and informed consent, are there any specific issues that the LRC or you as a legal empowerment or alternative lawyer face, or the communities that we work with face in terms of the implementation of the IPRA or the FPIC policy in relation to the IPRA?
Thank you, Sheila. Well, a lot of government implementers have a different conception and appreciation of consent. No? They think of it as, they think of FPIC as merely an administrative process. Very often, consent is understood to be consultation, when in fact, the law really provides for consent. Informed, meaning the communities ought to know the full breadth, the possible impacts, hazards of any of the development projects to be imposed or operationalized in the lands. No? And so there's a lot of machinations that goes on in the process of FPIC. We've had cases wherein community partners are invited to a presentation by mining corporations, and then they are made to sign attendance sheets. And these attendance sheets are then recreated to become consent documents. So something as blatant as that could be a manifestation of the violation of FPIC. So I'm sure there are many other examples, but that's one. And really, one of the main challenges is also informing government, our government officers, of the full meaning of what consent is all about. It is beyond consultation. It is really the free, prior, informed consent of communities.
Thanks, Mai. So now we go to SOR. Again, the question is, in your country, Thailand, do you have any policies or mechanisms that provide participation or encourages consent from the communities in terms of projects that have direct impact to environmental, IPs, and land rights?
Actually, in Thailand, for the consent, I would say no any law, but just only one thing that is look like consent, that is under the mining law. Under the mining law, if after there is a public hearing for the mining to get the mining project, if there is a conflict in the area, like the community doesn't want the mining and protest, then government need to make, we call prachamati. It's like it need to make the public hearing again, but with this public hearing, it need to vote to get whether the community want or not want the mining. Anyhow, I don't want to call this as a consent. It's because of the voice of the people like that under the prachamati. It's not the final decision. They just use it as another in the procedure of consideration of mining license. Then they need to collect all the information and then give to the mining department to consider whether they can give the license to that company or not. That's why I don't want to call this is a consent. But for the public participation, we have in the constitution law that is confirmed that whenever there is any development project, any project that will affect to the community, to the environment, and also health, then there is a two level. One, giving information. Second one, need to have the public hearing. Then under this thing, actually the practice of the community, they used to ask for information and also to participate for the public hearing. And we have another law under the constitution saying that whenever there is a project that it affected to the environment and also health impact, then it needs to have the EIA or EHIA, environmental impact assessment, or environmental and health impact assessment. And by the process of this assessment is also asked for the public hearing and public participation to join for the project, the owner of the project who have to make the EIA or EHIA, they need to organize the public hearing. But I want to say that this is just the process. It's not like the final decision for the project. Then both of them that in Thailand is not the consent of the concept of EPIC. Thank you.
Sorry, you mentioned that in your constitutional law, you have two levels of terms of getting consent. One is information and then public hearing. But you've also mentioned that this is the process and not the final decision of the community. In terms of the implementation of these processes, what are the challenges, or what challenges have you experienced as a civil society organization or as an NGO in your community, in your country, working with communities? What are the challenges?
Actually, you know, under the constitution for the public hearing, actually we have the cabinet resolution make the how to make the public hearing. The challenge is that they put 1, 2, 3 things that we can make and so-called public hearing, and the one is very strange is public hearing by online. That is mean, yes, by online. That is mean a lot of government agency making public hearing by online, posting the information in their website and saying that, okay, now we open for the comment or recommendation, and please give us online by sending to the website or sending the email or sending the mail, post mail. But can you imagine for the indigenous people, for the grassroots people, how they can access to the website to know about this hearing? Then there are many projects that the community never get information for the hearing and they cannot participate. This is very, very, very tricky, and we use this argument whenever we bring this case to court. We say that by this way is not so-called public hearing at all, because of they did not open for the people who are just like related with the company, with the project. Then it should not call as a public hearing. But sometimes the judge also did not think about that. They said it's like now is a globalization and everyone have internet, everyone can access. That is one. And then another one about the language barrier. We found a lot of problem because of the language, that especially with the with the indigenous people who are living in the forest, in the mountain, like in the northeast. They have their own language, and they cannot understand Thai language. But all the document making in the Thai language. Even when they make the public hearing, they also speak in Thai. They did not have interpreter to translate for them. Or for the people who are living in the deep south, they speak Yawi, they speak Malay. They also don't understand about Thai. Then it's also difficult for them to understand about information. Then when they come to join, sometimes people say that, okay, let's go to get the blanket, let's go to get the rice, let's go to get the water that the organizer will give to them, and then go back. This is a practice up here. And lastly one, we have the Mekong hydropower in Mekong River, and the government need to have the public consultation with the community along Mekong River. There are 8 provinces, about 1,500 sub-districts, but they just make the consultation only 3 times in the 3 provinces only. Then how we can call this is like a public consultation or public hearing?
Thank you, Sor. I think similarities in terms of my and your discussion is the actual meaning or essence of the getting the consent or community giving their consent. So there are a lot of challenges and barriers in terms of interpreting and actually getting the community's consent in both Philippines and Thailand. So your organization and you as a legal empowerment or alternative lawyers or legal empowerment workers, what do you think is the role of the civil society organization or legal empowerment civil society organizations, paralegals and lawyers and pro bono lawyers in ensuring that communities really are consulted and participate in this kind of discussions or even with projects that have impact to their community? So I think I'll have Sor first.
Yeah, I think this is very good question. When we are just like I'm a lawyer, and why I set up my organization? Because of this question. Because if we acting as a lawyer, then we just go to court, right? And then we just okay representing them, and then after that we go back to our office and nothing. We as a CSO, we need to bring up the community engaging with the process, whatever, and also try to help them access the information. We know already they don't have enough capacity to get information. Then we can be the middle person to get information to spread to the community, and then let community think about that, discussing, and we can play a role as like a consultant. We are not the leader. We should not leading the community. We should be just only the supporter. And then this is the way to make the community understand by themselves, not by leading from our side. And then also we can help them to see how the opportunity that they can engage in every step. And because of we know the process, we know the step, we know the law, we can also introduce them what they should do more for their struggle, for their exercising. Yeah.
Mai?
I don't know what else I can add with what Sor said, but pretty much yes, those are the mechanisms on the principles by which we also conduct our services with our partners. But just to belabor some points, empowerment through meaningful education. And when we say direct legal servicing, it's really a very different relationship from that of your traditional law firms, where you have a very top-down analysis of things and you hand the solutions to your clients. But rather, the empowerment, the education comes in a step-by-step process also of educating, because we can learn a lot from our community partners. And so in reality, it really is a partnership of us learning the meanings of their practices that informs and nuances even our appreciation of what is natural resources, of what is human rights, of how we see others, etc. So that's one way, a different way of seeing the relationship from what is traditional. That communities know their rights, of course, that's fundamental, but more importantly as well, that they are confident in asserting their rights. And with that, confidence comes in their confidence in us, that as much as we can, we are there, we are partners, we are friends. So LRC, we're also friends of the earth. So we like to generate that rapport and relationship, a conversation, rather than just professional, supporters in a way. CSO and pro bono lawyers, we can also act as watchdogs, especially in terms of policy and policy implementation, because at the national level, the mechanisms by which our legislature, sometimes that's beyond our community partners in terms of access. So we can be that, and we can be interpreters. We can ensure their voices by being very conscious in their participation. When we engage Congress, we don't speak on behalf, but allowing them to participate in that process as well. Having community partners bear witness to their conditions and situations on the ground in this processes at the national level. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So now my question is, we've talked about the role or the steps that can be taken by legal empowerment, pro bono lawyers and paralegals in terms of ensuring consent from communities. My next question is, as practitioners, as legal empowerment practitioners, from the perspective of us as NGO workers, what do you think? What are your recommendations on how we can, what we can do to improve our strategies, our approach, to ensure that communities are actually consulted, that they really provide consent in terms of projects relating to their area or community? So do you have any recommendations for us as practitioners, pro bono lawyers and paralegals? We have a lot of participants here who really want to help communities ensure their participation and consent. I think I'll start with Mai.
That's a tough question, and a lot of the things have already been said in terms of you could frame those things that Sor and I shared as tips, but also we continue to learn and how to be innovative and creative in our partnerships, in our mechanisms, in how to go about things. I think how do you say, tips, immersing ourselves. I think it's what I think we have the tools, we have the basic knowledge. I think what's challenging for pro bono lawyers is how do you keep at the work? How do you keep at being inspired when it seems that structural challenges, systemic challenges are present? And I think it's willingness to immerse in their realities, to go out into the field, to be constantly reminded of how this challenges more than the petitions that we write, how this unfolds and in the realities of their lived experiences. I think that's a constant reminder and will keep us going. So, and the more, that's a very basic thing. Maybe Sor can add more. in terms of the tips and mechanisms.
Yeah, Sor?
Yeah, I think, I agree with you, Mike, about this process. You know, what I think about when I try to talk, to share the idea of pro bono in Thailand is quite difficult because of not a lot of people understand what is a pro bono. Because the idea of pro bono is not easy to understand as well, because of in Thailand we don't have any organization talking about this, and even with the Loyal Council of Thailand, we have a Loyal Council of Thailand, and also there is some lawyer working as like a pro bono here under the Loyal Council of Thailand. But the thing is that sometimes they don't. They use a law. They use the knowledge of law to apply for their case. But in some case, it's not just only law. It's about the human right. It's about the environmental protection, and it's not written in the law. This is the very important when we just like try to convince our lawyer network to work as a pro bono with us. We have to also do some training, make them understand about the what is that, and then talking with them that when we talk about pro bono, you need to work without charge. You need to like voluntarily yourself to spend your budget, spend your time to work. But this idea is not easy because of the Thai lawyers, they poor. I would say that. Yeah, and we have a lot of lawyers every year. We have a lot of new lawyers every year. Then they still need the like a stable for their livelihood as well. But we also can share this idea for as the ethic, under the ethic of the lawyer. You can voluntarily and work for that, and then I appreciate some country they make it as the law, but it's not easy for apply. Then I very appreciate whenever people working as a pro bono in Thailand, because of they doing well. But in sometime nowadays we have another term of lawyer who are working in the name of pro bono, but not really pro bono, but for working to get their name in the public, that is also another things. With the paralegal, actually, for me, I don't work with the paralegal who are not in the community. I used to bring the paralegal from the community because of that is more easy for us to make them paralegal, and then they can also working for the community. It seemed like we did not bring them to other place that it will be difficult for them. But if they are paralegal from their community, then they can also voluntarily to work, right? Anyhow, we also working with some student group that they also like want to learn. Then they is in like a half as an intern and also paralegal. And then at the idea of this kind of thing, I think we need more promoting the idea of paralegal and also the pro bono in Asia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sor. Again, for my this is my last question actually, but I would like to go back also in the policies and mechanisms that you mentioned a while ago. Can you identify in terms of your major challenges in the implementation and enforcement of these policies and mechanisms? And then vis-a-vis, do you have policy recommendations, or do you have any suggestions in terms of improving these policies at your country or even at the regional level, because us as a Southeast Asia regional network, we would also love to hear your recommendations on how the region can also help in terms of advocating for expanded concept of consent. So I think I'll start with Mai, or should I start? Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sor. Sorry, Sheila. I think to respond to your question, I think I'm also responding to your previous question on the tips are kind of what are also the challenges. And I was reminded, I'm still stuck with the first question. Perhaps it's also contextualizing the law in reality and appreciating the law in other contexts, whether this be social science, etc., etc. Because one of the main challenges really especially with Indigenous peoples, is the underpinning, opposing, diverging worldviews. No? And as lawyers, you're trained to understand the law as dura lex sed lex. The law may be hard, but it is the law. But it also invites us to critique the law as we see it being implemented. No? And the laws, for example, in the Philippines, you have the dominant economic, also development framework operationalized by the government. No? And then you have policies that support this development framework, such as, for example, in the Philippines, the Philippine Mining Act, which regards ancestral domains and natural resources therein as precisely that, no? Economic resources, rather than their more, shall we say, fundamental worth. How Indigenous people see this as sites of biodiversity, living culture, and heritage, and their impacts really on larger communities. So when you impact on rivers in ancestral domains, that would impact on large agrarian lands in the lowlands. No? So things like that. How do you contextualize your appreciation for the implementation of the law for your soon-to-be lawyers, but also your government implementers? No? Because really, notwithstanding progress in our appreciation of human rights, you still have discrimination. No? That still abounds as far as Indigenous communities and marginalized communities are concerned. No? We hesitate to learn, and we think we can't learn anything from Indigenous knowledge and systems, when in fact their practices, for example, in agroecology, can be the way forward towards meaningful sustainability and perhaps addressing the climate emergency. So, and also it's not just the appreciation of particular laws, but the appreciation of particular laws in the context of other laws that are occurring in our jurisdictions. In the Philippines, we recently passed, for example, the Anti-Terror Act. It has the potential for constructing dissent of communities as acts of terrorism. So rather than the exercise of their constitutionally protected rights. So there really is an invitation to our lawyers, our government officials, and this may be the challenge, no? Because it goes beyond just the letter of the law, the contextualizing the meaning and appreciation of the law, a paradigm shift in a way of appreciating. So the challenge is certainly huge. What Marlon had said, it's very takes a lot of process because the challenge is systemic. The challenge is structural. But certainly, I hope not insurmountable. I'll go to the recommendations later. I think I'll let Sor speak first. Thank you.
Okay, Sor?
I just want to say like this. We should work with a bottom up and also from the top to the bottom. We play the role. We can play both roles. For the bottom up, because we are working on the cases, and some cases will be in court. We can try to apply the idea and the concept in the court case. That is the role of lawyer have to do, and request it for the clarification to get the concept. And if we success, that can be the precedent, and then it can apply. But in the other way, we also can see the opportunity for the any kind of mechanism. Thailand now we have the National Action Plan that we use it. In the National Action Plan, we make recommendation and we put that process, that concept in the National Action Plan and ask like it need to implement by the National Action Plan. And our National Action Plan is by the cabinet resolution. That is mean all the government agency have to follow the National Action Plan, and then they need to develop and implement to be the regulation or law. Then it seems like we have to do like this, freezing up from the up and then yes and then come or speed like this. Yeah, then we cannot deny both sides, but we have to see our capacity, what we can do. And then if we cannot do in another side, we can find our network to play role in that way. That is, I think it will be benefit for our concept. Thank you.
Okay. Any last policy recommendations you're thinking of? Maybe at the regional level, do you have any recommendations? Maybe you still have.
Perhaps just to echo what Marlon had said earlier, sometimes the Philippines has IPRA, but I've already said how challenging the implementation of IPRA is, especially when it comes to so-called development projects. A lot of these, the nature is really, we're dealing with multinational corporations. So we need to also be creative in terms of the full grasp of what are mechanisms we can access. So LRC is also advocating a legally binding treaty. There's going to be the 8th open-ended intergovernment negotiations coming October. And so we're going there to present stories of communities, how cases have been dragging on for years because the legal process in the Philippines takes forever. And perhaps at that level, we could bind the country with international, obligations of transnational corporations. Because at the same time, duty bearers, the character of duty bearers are changing. We're not just talking about states, we're also talking about multinational corporations. So those are possibilities of engagements.
Yeah, I
Okay.
support yes. I think it's the, when we talk about in one country, yeah, you can change something, right? But sometimes some issue is not easy in that country. Then by the networking with the regional level or global level is also helping for every country to recognize the norm of protection, everything. Then we need it like when we play in the national level, then we have to think about how we can make the regional level and global level. And I think in some country, especially with the Mekong country, it's very hard to work inside their own country. Then the regional and also international is very important role to support the people who are living in that country, to ask for implementation to protect the people. Okay.
Okay, so I think I will end my questions there. So we'll open the virtual floor for questions. You can actually write your questions in the chat box, or if you want to unmute or talk, please just raise your hand or unmute your mic. I think Mai and Sor will be happy to answer a few questions if you have any questions for them. Again, feel free to unmute or raise your hands if you want to ask questions. While I'm waiting for their questions, there are few comments here in the chat box from Yadana. Rather than public hearing, they just organize public gatherings. they take photos, attendance sheet, and they give away small gifts. I think Sor mentioned this, and they name it, they acquire community consent, business people in any place do this. So as pro bono lawyers, paralegals, watchdogs, we quite often face two extreme challenges. Government thinks we are problem makers, disturbing foreign local investment, and local communities sometimes see us that we are destroying their interest and advice on this. Any advice on this, please? So there's actually a question. So do you have any advice in terms of these issues that the paralegals, lawyers are facing? So government thinks that they are a problem, disturbing local investments, and then local communities sometimes see us that we are destroying their interests. So any advice? I mean, Mais or any of you can answer. Should I? Okay, sorry.
Okay. Yes, that I used to communicate with the like other stakeholder when I have a chance with even with the government side or with the company side, that you should not see us or community or human rights defender as your enemy. You have to think that we come to help you to, if your project is a transparency and accountability, then it will be easy for you to move on your project. Then what the transparency and accountability, then you have to open for the public participation. You need to open for the people who come to join you for giving you the recommendation, what you should do, what you should not do, something like that. You just hear them and then open. And a lot of places that I found, some community, they are not just like deny everything, but because of they don't know information, they don't know what exactly going on in that place. That's why they come to protest. But after they get information, after they get involved from the government or from the corporate, they also welcome, but they also requesting that please respect their right. And if you do big project by respecting the right of the people and not try to make any pollution, I don't think that the community will against you. Then that is what I used to talk with the company and also with the government to make them understand that we are not the troublemaker. Yeah.
How about you, Mai? Any advice for
Of
the
course,
lawyers?
what Sor mentioned with the going through the process, we ensure that our processes are, of course, legal within the parameters of the law. We introduce ourselves, so on and so forth. But at the same time, we cannot deny the reality that sometimes this is the hazard of the job that we have, because you really have opposing interests. For example, a big business versus indigenous communities that want to assert their rights to their ancestral domains. But we're always engaging, if not a critical engagement, always documenting our processes, always ensuring that our ways of engagement are via the processes afforded by us in the law. But again, sometimes in reality, it's also very political, because it's really about a question of power and the tensions of power. The law could only we know how it is, the Miranda Doctrine, the Bill of Rights, but we see a lot of projects that are violating people's rights on the ground. So on the one hand, we do our best with the processes, with the knowledge that we have of these processes and our legal rights. But at the same time, there is that part that it is indeed hazard of the job, especially when you have we all have different stories in the region, for example, and here in the Philippines, there's been increasing red tagging. It's a phenomenon by which anyone who opposes government is tagged as an insurgent. And by that purview, insurgency is considered anti-government and also terrorism. So there's also that reality that we need to navigate around, but that also calls to mind, Marlon had said this earlier, building movements, solidarity. When you have this power that opposes the interests of marginalized communities, the power that we have is in our power of solidarity.
It's already 6:03, so I will just entertain one last question. Okay. Any last question? You can write it in the chat box or unmute your mic. Or was it clear? Was the discussion clear? You don't have questions? Okay. I think we'll move forward with the breakout sessions because it's also an opportunity for the participants to share their own experiences in terms of how they engage communities or help communities, in terms of their participation in government and developmental projects. So Thin have created 4 breakout sessions. So we will be joining the breakout sessions, but just to observe, but you will be asked to actually discuss among yourselves some of the questions that were asked also a while ago. So the group will answer what are the policies or mechanisms in your country that provide opportunities for grassroots communities to participation or consent to the implementation of projects that have direct impact on their land, IP, and environmental rights. What are the challenges? In your experience, what steps can be taken by legal empowerment, paralegals, pro bono lawyers in ensuring that grassroots communities are able to participate? And then what are your recommendations on how best to improve legal empowerment and pro bono work to ensure consent and participation? So Thin is going to share the Google slide link wherein you will put your answers, or at least your sharing. But we're going to ask the group to assign a speaker, or at least someone who will report if we still have time. But if not, someone who will take note of the discussion and someone who will facilitate the discussion. So please look at the Google slide link on the chat box, and then Thin will divide the group into 4 breakout sessions. So we'll see you in 15 minutes. We only have 15 minutes to actually share our experiences. So Thin?
I'll open the breakout groups, and just one notice is that there are a lot of Laos participants. So for group 1 and group 4, I put mainly Laos participant. In group 1, we have the Laos interpreter. So I hope the interpreter will also help when translating some of the conversation. And room 2 and 3 will be mainly English speaking, but in room 3, I have a Myanmar interpreter in, as well as the Myanmar participants. So I wish the interpreter will also help translating some of the conversation. So the breakout room will be for 15 minutes, and I will open it right now.
Okay, I think. Are 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 we all here, team? There are no more breakout rooms open.
We all are here, yes.
Okay, okay. So thank you so much. That was a short breakout session. First we started with silence, and then finally we had some breakthrough in terms of discussion. So just to summarize, or just to at least synthesize the session that we have today, we don't have time to share what happened in the breakout session. But before we end the session, I would just like to highlight some of the inputs and sharing that was made by Marlon, by Mai, and by SOR during the earlier discussion. So we started with, I think the highlight of what Marlon said is us knowing the importance of consent or community giving consent. He also mentioned that we should focus uh, in terms of the impacted communities. They should be the primary focus or actors, and we should also harness the strength of the communities in terms of shaping and developing policies that relate or impacts them. He also mentioned highlighting women's participation in terms of the concept of consent. And he also mentioned corporate accountability. Then one of his recommendations is the role of the students. They should also be empowered. And the other one, I think, is the building of expertise within the group, within the communities, within us, civil society organizations working on legal empowerment. So, and then SOR and Mai share their experience in terms of their work in the in Thailand and Philippines. So they mentioned several policies and mechanisms that are present in their country. And they mentioned that one of the major challenges is the concept, or how government really understand the concept of consent. So there's still issues in terms of the genuine participation, or the participation of the community in terms of decision making. And there's also a mention of a challenge in terms of barriers, language barriers. But at the end of the day, the role of the legal empowerment civil society organizations is to get the community or help the community participate through giving information or helping them get information. And then SOR mentioned about working from bottom up approach, and then top bottom approach. So should go our effort should go both ways, empowering the communities, but also educating or working with the government offices for them to understand the importance of having the community's consent. So what are the recommendations? Of course, in terms of us as pro bono lawyers, legal empowerment practitioners, we should continue to work with the communities, understand the concerns and the challenges in terms of implementing policies that impact the communities, use the law, as SOR mentioned, but not only using the law and acting as lawyers, but we should also find other ways and initiatives to actually empower communities and change the system or the policies in our countries. So I think that's the discussion for this afternoon. So again, from the Legal Empowerment Network Southeast Asia, we'd like to thank everyone. Thank you, Marlon, for providing us some inputs on the concept of consent, and then for SOR and Mai for sharing your experiences in working with indigenous peoples, the environment, and of course, land rights. So before we end, any last, not last words, but any parting words for our participants before we have our picture taken, class picture. I'll start with Marlon.
Again, thank you everyone. And climate change, environmental justice should be a concern for all of us, and so we hope that we can work together in the future. Earlier, the issue of solidarity and movement were emphasized. So let's work together and continue our collaboration. Thank you.
Okay, Mai.
Thank you for your patience and time, and thank you for your sharing. In the breakout group, it felt like, the story of the Philippines is also your story, and your story is also our story. And stemming from that, I hope we can derive strength from each other, and move forward. We are small in numbers, but we be consistent. Change can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mai. Thank you, Mai. SOR?
Yeah, I hope that we can create more bigger and bigger network and work together and support each other, especially the people who are in the country that is difficulty for your raising awareness. I actually my session, all of them are Laos, and then we talk about that. We actually, I am very concerned when I talk with my Lao friend, because of whenever they want to go to give the information to the community, they have to go for getting the license from the MOJ, the Ministry of Justice. But I hope that every country will be better and better if we join hands together. Thank you.
Thank you. So last request, group picture, can you turn on your camera or your videos? Thin, can you take the picture? I don't know how to take a screenshot in my laptop.
Yes, I can
Okay.
do.
Okay, I'll remove the spotlight so we can have. Okay. Tell us when to smile. Sorry. Please show us your beautiful faces. Oh, there's Ed. Hi, Ed.
I'm taking 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay, we're done.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and see you again in our next session. And please join the Legal Empowerment Network. You can contact us or just search the Namati website if you want to join the Legal Empowerment Network. And the magic word is collaboration. Okay, I think there's a prize at the end of the conference.
Certificate. The certificate.
Certificate. Oh my God. Collaboration. Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank
So
you.
bye everyone, and thank you for joining the session.
Bye.
Thanks, Mai. Thanks,
Bye. Thank
Sor.
you. Bye. Bye.
Salamat.
Salamat.
Bye-bye.